January 13th, 2018. Well, today we are unpacking it all. So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. I post 3 videos on one of these topics every single week, so if you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel. I would love to have you here. And once again, I am celebrating single parents this holiday season. If you're a single parent and need a little help making Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate incredible for your children, or you just need a little extra help with groceries, school supplies, etc., please email me your Amazon wish list to letfresherin@gmail.com with a little bit about yourself, and I will share your story and your list on my channel. So without further ado, let's jump into this and learn a little bit more about Cat West. Kathleen Cat Dawn West was by many accounts a vivacious and outgoing woman who lived life out loud. Born in the early 1970s and raised in Florida, Kat grew up with a flair for the dramatic. As a child, she doted on her dolls and dreamed of becoming a mother someday. In her teen years, she also developed aspirations to become a model. Those who knew Kat often noted her uncanny resemblance to Hollywood icon Marilyn Monroe, a similarity that Kat eagerly embraced. She became obsessed with Marilyn, studying the star's style and recreating her glamorous poses and hairstyles in photographs. She was trying to emulate Marilyn in every way, recalls veteran reporter Carol Robinson, who would later investigate Kat's life. Beneath the confident, blonde bombshell exterior, however, friends and family say that Kat struggled with self-esteem. There were always self-esteem issues there. She craved adulation from people, whether she knew them or not, Robinson noted. Compliments from her parents that she was beautiful would be waved off. "You're just my mom and dad," Kat would reply, hinting at a persistent need for outside validation. In her 20s, Kat faced turbulent times. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and grappled with bouts of depression and isolation. To cope, she often turned to alcohol. By her family's account, Kat had a tendency to binge drink and would sometimes lose control when intoxicated. Her mother, Nancy Martin, later revealed that Kat was an alcoholic who fell all the time. In fact, when Kat drank heavily, she became known for outrageous antics, stripping off clothing or engaging in risky stunts for attention. Kat's own mother recounted how her daughter would sometimes go outside barefoot and scantily clad while drunk, even jumping on a backyard trampoline or climbing onto objects. This was behavior that alarmed those close to her. Kat's mother and mother-in-law agreed that such episodes were not uncommon. Kat would get, quote, rip-roaring drunk and had been known to go outside without clothes and even trip and fall during her intoxicated escapades. These hard years took their toll, but Kat obviously yearned for stability and love, something that finally seemed within reach by the mid 2000s. In February 2004, at a Super Bowl party in Alabama, fate introduced Kat to the man who would change her life, but also maybe take it. Jeff West was an Army recruiter stationed locally, and when Kat struck up a conversation with him at the gathering, sparks flew immediately. They fell in love on their first date, Kat's parents recall, describing the connection as truly love at first sight. Within a year, the couple had impulsively eloped to Las Vegas and married in a whirlwind of passion. For Kat, who had yearned for a family, Jeff seemed to be a stabilizing force. Jeff, or William Jeffrey West, was a U.S. Army veteran more than 2 years her senior. He had served with the military police during his Army career and later transitioned into civilian law enforcement, working as a police officer at a college campus in Alabama. In personality, Jeff was often described as easygoing, polite, and somewhat reserved. This was a stark contrast to Kat's flamboyant extroversion. Friends would later muse that they were an unlikely pair. Seeing how Kat carried herself and what she looked like, and then seeing Jeff, it never really made sense to me until I got to know them, said Brittany Dreisler, a friend of the couple. Kat was the colorful life of the party, while Jeff was the quiet, grounding presence. Opposites in many ways, yet deeply in love. Shortly after marrying, Kat and Jeff welcomed their most precious gift, a baby daughter named Lola, born in 2005. Kat embraced motherhood with joy. Lola was her light, her gift, recalls Brittany. Kat absolutely doted on her little girl. In those early years, the West family's life was marked by frequent moves, as Jeff's military career and later law enforcement career took them all around the country. By 2011, Jeff had left active duty, and the Wests were living in Southern California, where Jeff continued working in Army recruiting. It was there that Brittany Dreisler first met them. Brittany's husband visited the local recruiting office considering enlistment, and Jeff basically had him at hello. The recruiter's friendliness instantly won them over. Jeff even went above and beyond by inviting the young couple to his home for dinner that night. When Brittany met Kat, she found her just as welcoming and vivacious. Kat answered the door in a casual tank top and shorts, exclaiming, "Hey girl," and immediately offered Brittany a drink. The two couples became fast friends, often socializing together. And Brittany observed that the West marriage, while loving, didn't exactly fit the traditional mold. Kat was uninhibited and attention seeking, even around others, whereas Jeff was very mild mannered and indulgent with his wife's behavior. She was very extroverted, the light of the party, Brittany says. Kat would dance and sing on tables at bars despite being hopelessly off key, and even at home, she would perform little stunts. In one memorable instance, Kat, feeling playful, leapt from her kitchen counter to the sofa, topless, in front of their house guests. Brittany's husband was shocked at the sight, but Jeff took it in stride, telling his wife, "Okay, boo-boo, I love you. All right, baby girl," to try to calm her down. According to friends, Jeff never displayed jealousy or anger towards Kat, even when her behavior crossed social norms. "I never saw an ounce of jealousy from him. Never," Brittany emphasizes, laughing at how unusual it all seemed. In fact, Jeff appeared proud to have an attractive, free-spirited wife. He affectionately called her pet names, patiently endured her fiery moods when she drank, and always stood by her. If Kat got loud or feisty while intoxicated, Jeff would remain calm and diffuse the situation with loving reassurance. By all outward accounts, Jeff was a devoted husband who accepted Kat as she was, wild side and all. As social media blossomed in the 2010s, Kat discovered a new outlet for her need for attention and admiration. Around 2016 or 17, she began cultivating an online persona as an adult content model, branding herself Kitty Kat West. On platforms like Twitter and Instagram, Kat posted glamorous and risque photos of herself, often in lingerie or pinup style poses, channeling her inner Marilyn Monroe for a growing audience. She even described herself as an online exhibitionist, openly embracing the provocative nature of her content. Kat launched a subscription-based adult website, later identified as an OF account, where paying subscribers, mostly male admirers, could access her more explicit photos and videos for a fee of $15.99 per month. On Twitter, under the handle @KittyCatWest75, she amassed followers by posting racy selfies and teasing her premium content, linking eager fans to her private site. By the end of 2017, Kat's Instagram had about 52,000 followers, and her online subscriber count was in the hundreds, if not more. Friends say she was earning money from this venture, but it was not just financial. It was personal. The shy, insecure side of Kat seemed to flourish in the glow of anonymous adoration. In real life, Kat wasn't always confident. "Yes, you have your husband, but you always want to be pretty to others," Brittany said. Posting sexy photos and receiving compliments empowered Kat, making her feel desirable and validated. She was making money, but it was about a lot more than just money. By 2018, Kat was knee-deep in the online modeling industry, having ramped up her content production significantly. She interacted with her subscribers, took special requests for personalized photos, and cultivated her image as a modern-day pinup starlet. Notably, Jeff was fully aware of and involved in this aspect of her life. Investigators would later learn that Jeff often acted as Kat's personal photographer, snapping her boudoir pictures and helping her post them online. Far from forbidding Kat's provocative hobby, Jeff appeared to actively support it, a detail that surprised even seasoned observers. That surprised me because I don't think many men would feel that way, remarked Carol Robinson. According to Brittany, Jeff got the best of both worlds. He was able to be with his wife, and she got what he wanted to show off what she has going on, and he was not going to leave her. In other words, Jeff was proud of Kat's beauty and content to let her shine online, as long as she was happy. Yet, even as Kat garnered attention as Kitty Cat West and projected an image of sultry confidence, there were signs of strain beneath the surface. Close friends and family were aware that Kat's old demons like alcohol and insecurity still lurked. By late 2017, some tension had developed in the West household related to Kat's drinking and possibly the extent of her online activities. While Jeff was outwardly accepting of Kat's internet fame, prosecutors would later suggest that he was growing frustrated with some aspects of it, particularly the time and focus Kat devoted to her phone and social media. And indeed, digital evidence would later reveal that the couple's text message exchanges in the weeks leading up to Kat's death included arguments that sometimes escalated dramatically. These messages painted a picture of a volatile relationship with extreme highs and lows. They would be flirtatious, even interspersed with intimate nude photos, but then they would have these heated fights, including talks of splitting up. The relationship had become volatile. Notably, many of the harshest, most combative words in the texts came from Kat rather than Jeff. At no point in the messages was there any real threat of physical harm. It seemed to just be a passionate verbal quarrel rather than resembling any real violence. But still, the frequency of the fights and emotionally turbulent exchanges led the trial judge to later remark that Kat's death was foreseeable, given the condition of the marriage. This hindsight assessment implied that the West's union, while outwardly loving, had underlying fault lines that could crack under pressure. By January 2018, Kat and Jeff had been married for over 13 years. They kept up an appearance of a happy marriage, regularly scheduling date nights to keep their spark alive. In fact, one family rule was to have a special night out together about once a week. Friday, January 12th, 2018, was one such night for the Wests, and it would turn out to be their last. On that Friday, Kat and Jeff set out to enjoy their usual date night ritual. Jeff's parents took care of 12-year-old Lola for the evening so the couple could have some time to themselves. The Wests chose to dine at a local restaurant in town, and according to later testimony, the couple had dinner and drinks together and nothing seemed amiss. After dinner, before heading home, they made one last stop, R&R Wine and Liquor, a small liquor store in Calera, to pick up some more libations for the night. Surveillance footage from the shop at about 8:40 p.m. captured Jeff and Kat in a lighthearted mood, casually browsing the aisles for their favorite drinks. The black and white security video shows Kat and Jeff walking arm in arm at one point, looking every bit as a content couple out on the town. In a playful moment caught on camera, Jeff can be seen giving Kat a gentle pat on her backside as she walks ahead of him, a small public display of affection that elicited smiles and laughter from the couple. Store employees later reported that the pair appeared to be in a good mood and even flirtatious during this purchase. Kat selected an expensive bottle of Lucid absinthe costing almost $75. It's a strong green liqueur, while Jeff grabbed a bottle of Jameson Irish whiskey. They paid and left around 8:45 p.m., with Jeff chivalrously holding the door open and jokingly swatting Kat's rear again as they exited, prompting her to giggle. This video would later be played in court to emphasize that just hours before Kat's death, she and Jeff seemed affectionate, relaxed, and far from any altercation. By approximately 9 p.m., Jeff and Kat returned to their one-story brick home on Greenwood Circle, a suburban cul-de-sac. With their daughter safely at their grandparents' for the night, they had the house to themselves. According to Jeff's later statements, they intended to continue their merriment at home, perhaps have a little party for two, and indeed, evidence shows that once home, the couple opened the newly purchased absinthe. Jeff snapped a photo of the distinctive absinthe bottle, glowing green in color, perhaps as a novelty to share online. He posted a picture of the bottle on social media, suggesting a celebratory mood. So far, nothing seemed amiss. But around 10 to 10:30 p.m., the evening took a turn. Both Jeff and Kat had been drinking steadily. Kat especially. Toxicology later would peg Kat's blood alcohol concentration at a very high 0.23%, nearly 3 times the legal driving limit. Jeff, who had some physical discomfort from a past leg injury, claims that by about 10:30 he was ready to call it a night. He said he was feeling the effects of the alcohol and his leg was hurting, prompting him to retire to bed early. Kat, however, was still in a partying mood. Jeff later recounted to police that he believed Kat stayed up, possibly drinking more absinthe, listening to music, and enjoying herself solo after he went to bed. Yet before Jeff actually fell asleep, some kind of spat occurred between the two of them regarding Kat's phone usage. This detail emerged later from Jeff's own admissions and from forensic evidence. Jeff said his memory was hazy due to the alcohol, but he did recall being aggravated by Kat's constant attention to her cell phone that night. It's not entirely clear what Kat was doing on the phone, perhaps engaging with social media or OF followers or texting someone, but it was enough to annoy Jeff in that intoxicated moment. In a flash of irritation, Jeff took Kat's iPhone and flung it out the front door of the house into the yard/driveway just before he headed to bed. Digital evidence would later support this account. The home security system log recorded the front door opening at 10:53 p.m. for a very brief interval, likely when Jeff opened the door to toss the phone outside. Additionally, Kat's phone activity suddenly ceased around 10:54 p.m., and its internal motion sensor registered no movement after that time. Together, these clues strongly suggest that at approximately 10:53 p.m., an inebriated Jeff West hurled Kat's phone out of the house, effectively ending whatever scream time she was engrossed in. This incident may have sparked an argument between the couple, though Jeff claimed there was no big fight, just that he was irritated and went to bed afterward. But if someone threw my phone out a door or window and effectively smashed it, from what it sounds like, that would probably escalate the argument. Because obviously, this would leave Kat upset. Her phone, which is a vital tool for her online interactions, was now outside, possibly broken. But oddly enough, Kat apparently did not immediately run out to retrieve it. One theory is that Kat was just so extremely intoxicated by this point, and she may not have initially realized or cared that her phone was gone, or she possibly continued drinking and dancing around by herself in the living room after Jeff went to the bedroom, or she may have just passed out on the couch. Jeff, for his part, said he went to sleep around 10:30 or 11, insisting nothing violent happened while he was awake. But the night's most fateful moments were yet to unfold. What exactly transpired between roughly 11 p.m. and 1:51 a.m. is a mystery. No living witness has given a complete account. The household security system offers a critical timestamp, though. At 1:51 a.m. on January 13, the West's front door was opened again, and this time, it was left open for several hours. That open door alert at 1:51 is the last recorded action until police arrived. Investigators believe this marks the moment Kat finally went outside, likely intent on finding her thrown phone in the yard or street. It appears Kat did not take the time to put on any additional clothing before rushing out. She was later found wearing just a pink sports bra and nothing from the waist down. Perhaps she had been sleeping or lounging in that state, or perhaps she hastily ran out in underwear without realizing the chill. But either way, it kind of shows that she's really impaired and has a very urgent state of mind. Outside, under the dim streetlights, Kat would recover her phone, but she never made it back inside her home. At some point at 1:51 a.m., a violent encounter occurred on the street in front of the West home. The evidence would later indicate that Kat suffered a brutal blow to the left side of her head, consistent with potentially being struck by the heavy absinthe bottle that the couple had been drinking from. The exact sequence of events is known only through forensic reconstruction. Prosecutors theorized that Jeff awoke or was still awake and realized that Kat had gone outside for the phone. Possibly fearing she might wander off or angry that he'd been ignored, he followed her outside with that glass absinthe bottle in hand. On the dark street, an argument or scuffle must have ensued. Perhaps Kat yelled at him for throwing her phone, or perhaps Jeff was still irritated about the earlier distraction. But what is clear is that things escalated quickly and turned physical. In a sudden moment of aggression, Jeff allegedly swung the absinthe bottle at Kat's skull. The base of the bottle, dense and heavy, connected with the left side of Kat's head, inflicting a devastating injury. The force was enough to cause a 2-inch laceration and fracture in her skull. This single catastrophic blow would prove fatal. Kat collapsed to the ground, bleeding profusely from the head wound. A post-mortem exam later detailed that the gash was roughly 2 inches long on the left side of her scalp, and that it would have required a significant amount of force to produce. The green absinthe bottle itself was found to have a chipped base and traces of Kat's blood on it, consistent with it having been used to bludgeon her. Grievously wounded, Kat appeared to have tried to move or crawl after the blow. Investigators found 2 distinct pools of blood at the scene, suggesting her body had been in at least 2 positions and moved or shifted a short distance. Kat may have initially fallen in the roadway and then attempted in her last conscious moments to drag herself out of the street and onto adjacent grass. Indeed, when she was found, Kat's head and upper body were on the edge of the road, while her lower body was on the grass of the neighbor's yard. Crime scene analyst Sergeant Mike Melhoff noted that her body's position indicated movement and did not look like a simple fall. It appeared that the body had been moved more than once, he would later remark. Kat ultimately came to a rest in a fetal position, as though instinctively curling up from pain, and likely died not long after the head trauma. The cause of death was later certified as blunt force trauma to the head, and the manner would be eventually deemed a homicide. With Kat lying lifeless on the ground, the remaining scene was chilling. The absinthe bottle ended up right beside her, and bizarrely, it was perched right atop her iPhone, which she had apparently retrieved. This peculiar placement immediately struck officers as too neat to be accidental. Sergeant Melhoff, one of the first responders, found it odd that a round bottle would just happen to sit perfectly balanced on a phone without having been deliberately placed. So, what about Jeff during these fatal moments? Though we lack his own account of this time frame, the evidence suggests he was present and active. The home's front door was left standing open from 1:51 a.m. onward, implying that no one re-entered to close the door. A crucial witness account would later further contradict Jeff's version of events. A neighbor would testify that around 5 a.m., she saw someone pacing back and forth inside the west doorway or foyer area while police were being called. Given that Kat was already incapacitated outside, the person pacing could only have been Jeff. This suggests that after the incident, Jeff lingered at the scene or in the house without seeking immediate help. If it was truly an accident, wouldn't you immediately try to get help so your wife doesn't potentially die outside on the street in the cold, scantily clad? The quiet pre-dawn hours passed by with Kat's body lying out by the curb, the front door ajar, and Jeff apparently not raising any alarm. It wasn't hours later that help arrived. And guess what? It was not summoned by Jeff. A 19-year-old neighbor, Macorsha Purifoy, was driving down the street heading to her early morning job when she noticed a strange shape on the ground near the West residence. It was still dark and bitterly cold outside. At first, Macorsha wasn't sure what she was seeing. It was dark, it was cold, I wasn't sure, what was going on, she said. As she drew closer, the sight clarified into horror, a human body lying partly in the road. Macorsha later described seeing a woman's naked backside exposed and realizing this person was likely dead. Shocked and frightened, Macorsha raced home. She lived very close because she wanted to get her parents for help. She and her mother returned to the scene where they found Kat unresponsive, exactly where Macorsha had spotted her. Kat's skin was frozen, indicating that she'd been out in the frigid night for some time. There were no signs of life. Macorsha's mother immediately dialed 911 at 5 a.m. to report the body and ask for an ambulance. During the 911 call, the dispatcher instructed them to check if the woman was breathing. They carefully approached. Kat's body was partly face down with blood visible around her head. There were no signs of breath or pulse. It was evident that she was beyond help. Macorsha later said that she was so traumatized by the gruesome discovery that she sat in her car crying while waiting for police, unable to keep looking. Meanwhile, her mother, Waukesha Blevins, stayed on the phone with 911, describing the scene. Critically, as Waukesha spoke to dispatchers, she noticed movement at the West's house. The front door was open, and a figure appeared to be walking nervously inside the doorway or on the front porch. This figure, presumably Jeff West, did not approach the 911 callers or the body, but just seemed to be pacing back and forth as if watching what was happening. It was an image that stuck in Waukesha's mind, because moments later, that man would claim he was asleep until sirens woke him. Within about 10 minutes, at 5:10 a.m., officers from the Calera Police Department arrived on Greenwood Circle in response to the call. Sergeant Mike Melhoff, a veteran investigator, was among those responding. What they found confirmed the worst. Kat West was dead at the scene, likely for some time given the cold stiffness of her body. The first responders secured the area and noted the key pieces of evidence around Kat's corpse: the cell phone and absinthe bottle, careful not to disturb their curious arrangement. They also immediately took notice of Jeff West, who had by then stepped outside his house. Jeff was standing in the doorway, watching the police as they worked. One officer observed that Jeff even lit a cigarette and smoked on the porch, appearing surprisingly calm for a man whose wife lay dead a few yards away. When Sergeant Melhoff entered the house to speak with Jeff, he found Jeff's demeanor unsettlingly subdued. Jeff was described as oddly reserved and not acting in a way Melhoff expected, knowing that his wife was dead outside. Jeff didn't rush to his wife's side, nor did he seem hysterical. He was cooperative, but just quiet. Melhoff had to remind him that everybody grieves in a different way, trying to give Jeff the benefit of the doubt in that stressful moment. When asked what happened, Jeff claimed he didn't know. He told officers that he'd been asleep and was only awoken by the sound of the police cars and his dogs barking at all the commotion. In Jeff's version, he had slept through the night and had no idea how Kat ended up outside. He speculated to police that perhaps Kat had accidentally fallen and injured herself while drunk, or even that she might have been struck by a passing car on the street. Jeff also asserted that he and Kat's marriage was in a good place, and that they hadn't fought that night, painting a picture of a normal, happy evening. EMS personnel on the scene confirmed Kat was beyond resuscitation, and Shelby County Coroner Lena Evans was called in to begin an official death investigation. By mid-morning, news of the mysterious death had started to spread around town. A beautiful blonde woman found half naked and dead in a respectable suburban neighborhood. It was a scenario rife with intrigue. Cale Robinson, that local journalist who covers crime, noted how extraordinary it was. That stuff like this just doesn't happen in that neighborhood. Law enforcement, meanwhile, had to determine, was this an accident or was it a murder? At first glance, there were puzzling elements that could point either way. The head wound could have resulted from a fall, but it was severe and there was no obvious height or object from which Kat could have accidentally fallen to produce such a trauma. There was also the possibility of a hit and run. Was it conceivable that Kat, intoxicated, wandered outside and a car struck her? The lack of any other injuries on her body and the presence of that absinthe bottle weapon seemed to argue against a car accident, but authorities had to consider everything. Then, of course, there was the potential of a third-party attacker. Kat's scant state of dress raised the suspicion of SA in some minds, though early examination found no signs of R-word or any violence of sexual nature. Rather, it suggested consensual sexual activity that had occurred sometime that night, possibly between Kat and Jeff. Could someone have targeted Kat due to her online persona? Or could a stranger have happened upon her outside? These questions loomed as detectives began the formal investigation. From the moment officers arrived, Jeff West was treated as a person of interest, as any spouse would be in such cases, but he was not formally detained. Investigators separated him from the scene and began the painstaking task of documenting and collecting evidence. The neighborhood was canvassed at dawn for any witnesses, surveillance cameras, or signs of an intruder. Nothing obvious turned up from neighbors aside from the 911 caller who'd already given her account. No one reported seeing or hearing an altercation during the night, though the houses were spaced pretty far apart on that street. At the scene, technicians carefully bagged the absinthe bottle and Kat's iPhone for forensic analysis. These were potentially the murder weapon and a key to unlocking the victim's final communication. Both items were smeared with blood, but crucially, later fingerprints would be lifted from the absinthe bottle's surface. When analyzed, it was found that the only clear fingerprints on the bottle belonged to Jeff West. This early finding was significant, though not in itself proof of murder. After all, Jeff admitted both he and Kat handled the bottle while they were drinking. The position, though, of Jeff's fingerprints would later become important. Forensic experts noted that Jeff's prints were upside down on the neck of the bottle, consistent with holding it inverted as one would if swinging it like a club. This detail would only come out after thorough lab work. Meanwhile, officers observed no signs of forced entry or struggle inside the house. The home was tidy and undisturbed, aside from some drinking glasses and the open liquor bottles from the night before. The only out-of-place detail was the front door being left ajar. This suggested that whatever happened to Kat occurred outside, and she either left on her own or was lured there. One possibility considered early on was that Kat might have slipped outside in a drunken state and Jeff simply never noticed, hence his story of sleeping through it. But investigators found that Jeff's initial demeanor and statements were very, very suspicious. He was just too calm, too quick to propose an accidental scenario. And then there was the matter of him not noticing his wife missing from bed or house for what would have been several hours. Now, standard procedure in such cases is to interview the spouse extensively, and Calera police did just that. On the morning of January 13th, Jeff West voluntarily went to the police station and spent about 6 hours with detectives answering questions. During these interviews, Jeff stuck to his story. He claimed ignorance of what happened, denied any fight or foul play, and theorized that Kat's death must have been an accident. Jeff was described as cooperative and consistent in the recounting of the evening, and he emphasized that he loved his wife and that they had enjoyed a normal date night. Importantly, Jeff was also candid about Kat's drinking problem and her online activities. When asked, he openly acknowledged that Kat was an exhibitionist online, that she had a paid adult website where she posted nude or risque photos. He admitted that he himself often helped photograph her for this and that he was okay with it, not jealous. And indeed, Jeff's attorney later said that he was aware there was this other lifestyle and he was not jealous about it. To the police, this was a noteworthy angle. Kat's very public, provocative social media presence could have attracted a dangerous element. Jeff even speculated aloud that there are a lot of creeps out there who might have become obsessed with Kat and harmed her. This was essentially planting the idea that perhaps an overzealous fan or stalker was responsible, a notion Jeff's defense would promote more strongly later. Investigators did not arrest Jeff that first day. They didn't yet have conclusive evidence of what exactly happened, and it was prudent to cast a wide net. As Calera Police Chief Sean Lemley later said, Jeff was a suspect in his wife's murder from the very beginning, but evidence was needed to support suspicions. So while Jeff remained a person of interest, he was allowed to return home after questioning. He went to stay with his daughter at his mother-in-law Nancy Martin's house in the aftermath, as the West home was an active crime scene and because Kat's family rallied around him at that point. Over the next several days and weeks, investigators methodically assembled the puzzle pieces. Autopsy results from January 14th confirmed what was apparent. Kat had died from blunt force trauma to the left side of her head, and the wound was pretty unlikely to have been caused by a simple fall. Toxology tests completed within a couple weeks showed Kat's blood alcohol content that high rate. Detectives would also obtain a warrant to search the contents of both Kat and Jeff's phones, as well as the data from the home's ADT security system. The ADT logs, as noted, yielded a critical timeline. That door that briefly opened at 10:53 p.m., possibly pointing to the phone throw incident. Then the door continuously opened from 1:51 a.m. until police arrived at 5:12. The fact that the door stayed open for over 3 hours suggested that no one re-entered the house to close it, which would have been unusual if, say, Kat had accidentally fallen. One would expect Jeff to have gone out and then come back in and shut the door. Instead, it looked like whoever was involved left that door gaping in haste or in panic. From Jeff's phone, investigators pulled data from a fitness tracking app that ran in the background. It showed that shortly after 11 p.m. on January 12th, Jeff's phone registered 18 steps. This could indicate that Jeff got up and moved around the house at that time, perhaps pacing or going to the bathroom, which was a minor detail, but one that didn't directly conflict with his story. More telling were the text message records that were recovered. They found evidence that at one point the couple had discussed calling it quits on their marriage via text, only to reconcile soon after. And indeed, the police had no prior domestic reports or calls on record for the West household. Friends insisted that these texts were just the kind of spats any long term couple might have, not indicating any actual violence. And indeed, the police had no prior DV reports or calls on record for the West household. One piece of digital evidence initially raised alarm: Kat's OF communications. Because Kat's phone and computers gave her access to her subscriber interactions, investigators spent weeks sifting through her messages, emails, and social media to see if any fan or stalker had made threats or seemed dangerously fixated on her. And this was a massive undertaking. Sergeant Melhold said that there were thousands of names of followers and subscribers to evaluate, requiring about 3 weeks of work by law enforcement and assistance from the FBI's cyber unit. The big question on their minds: could one of Kat's online admirers have tracked her down and harmed her in person? It wasn't impossible. True crime history has cases of obsessed fans crossing the line. The investigators diligently checked IP addresses, communication logs, and any suspicious messages in Kat's inbox. When Melhoff first learned that OF allowed some direct interaction and custom request, it opened up a Pandora's box of potential suspects. However, after exhaustive analysis, they found no evidence pointing to an enamored fan as a culprit. None of Kat's many online followers had made contact that could be linked to an in person meeting or harassment. There were no stalkers lurking in the shadows that they could identify. So, this significantly weakened the theory that there was an outside assassin and shifted focus back to the most statistically common scenario in such a case: an intimate partner homicide. By early February 2018, forensic results started to come back. The clincher might have been those fingerprints on the bottle combined with the coroner's findings. Shelby County's Chief Assistant District Attorney Roger Hepburn reviewed the case with investigators. They now had enough circumstantial evidence lining up in one direction. Jeff was the only one with motive, if one considers the marriage friction and possibly an intoxicated quarrel. He was the last person with Kate. He had the opportunity, and every forensic indicator — the prints, the staged crime scene, the timeline inconsistencies — they all pointed to him. So, on February 22nd, nearly 6 weeks after Kat's death, police made their move. Early that morning, Calera PD, with an arrest warrant signed by a magistrate, arrived at the Martin household where Jeff was staying. They took Jeff West into custody around 8:15 a.m. without incident, charging him with murder in the death of his wife. Jeff West's arrest was a bombshell for those who knew the family, and even for Kat's own parents. Nancy Martin, Kat's mother, staunchly believed Jeff was innocent and had been vocal about it. Just a month earlier, at Jeff's bond hearing, Nancy had testified on his behalf, which, if my mother supported my partner who possibly murdered me, I would be haunting her from beyond. Like, what is wrong with you? There's no other evidence to support that it could be anybody else. Now, outside the court, tearfully sitting beside Jeff's mother, Carolyn West, Nancy told reporters, "He's a good man, and he didn't do this." The Martins and West together took care of the daughter Lola after Kat's death, and Nancy said that she saw how devastated Jeff was, even describing him breaking down in tears upon seeing Kat's body at the funeral home, which seems convenient considering he didn't show any remorse or sadness or pain until this point, allegedly. Kat's father, stepfather, and other family members similarly rallied behind Jeff. This family support for the accused was very unusual in a murder case and would become a notable aspect of trial and media coverage. But in Nancy Martin's view, all the evidence could be explained by an accident. She knew her daughter's habits intimately: the bipolar swings, the heavy drinking, the risky behavior. Nancy revealed that she didn't even know about Kat's online kitty cat identity until after her death, which shows that Kat had compartmentalized her life to some degree. But what OF model wants to run home and tell their mom about being an OF model? Nancy felt Kat likely wanted everyone to think she was beautiful, and that need for attention drove her online exhibitionism. But crucially, Nancy did not think any of that implicated Jeff in wrongdoing. She said Kat could well have drunkenly fallen. In fact, both Nancy and Carolyn, Jeff's mom, told the court that they believed Kat fatally fell on her own while intoxicated. Carolyn testifies that Jeff had told her how the evening went. He took her out to dinner, he had a couple drinks, he went to bed and went to sleep. Kat kept drinking because Kat was an alcoholic, unquote. This is what Carolyn literally said in court. But despite the family's pleas, a judge declined to reduce Jeff's hefty $500,000 bond, citing the severity of the charge and noting that Jeff, as someone facing life in prison if convicted of murder, could be a flight risk or danger if released. Thus, Jeff remained jailed in Shelby County from his arrest in February 2018 onward. Prosecutor Roger Hepburn, speaking to media, expressed confidence. He believed he had a really strong case. Meanwhile, public interest in the case was exploding because of the salacious details that emerged. The revelation that Kat was an online exhibitionist, effectively an early OF model, made headlines and sparked frenzied discussions on social media and true crime forums. I mean, everyone was so convinced it was going to be some obsessive fan stalking her. But can you imagine the perfect timing for a disgruntled fan? Waiting outside your house, seeing that you're going out on a date, knowing that you've gotten drunk, watching you fight with your husband, waiting for you to go out and retrieve your cell phone. It just seems like things lined up way too perfectly if this was some kind of stranger who had been stalking her. And if there's no evidence that she was being stalked, that doesn't mean that she wasn't being stalked potentially. But it does call into question that argument for me. Yes, there are fans that get really, really obsessive and will stalk people. But when all of the evidence leads to one outcome, you just have to believe that outcome. And I think it's really telling the staging of the bottle on the phone. If their argument was about her giving more attention and time to these men on the internet who were paying for her attention and time, it would not be surprising for Jeff to kind of think, well, this is the reason I killed you in his drunken outrage. So he just puts the murder weapon on the very thing that kind of started destroying their marriage, her cell phone. After a lengthy pretrial period slowed in part by the pandemic, Jeff West finally had his day in court in late 2020. The charge was murder, which in Alabama could carry up to life in prison if proven as an intentional killing. However, as the trial neared, both sides were very cognizant of the challenges in proving intent versus accident, in this case built largely on circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors Bill Bostick, also the trial judge who would oversee the sentencing, and Assistant DA Daniel McBrayer led the state's case, while Jeff's defense was led by attorney John Robbins. In a surprising move before the trial commenced, prosecutors offered Jeff West a plea deal that could have averted a trial entirely. The deal reportedly would have allowed Jeff to plead guilty to a lesser offense and be released for time already served, plus a short probation. Essentially, given that he'd already spent 3 years in jail awaiting trial, he could potentially walk free. And it's very rare for a DA to offer what amounts to a minimal sentence in a homicide case, but presumably the state was hedging its bets, acknowledging the risk that a jury might acquit or that proving murder beyond reasonable doubt would be tricky. Jeff West, however, refused the plea deal. He maintained his innocence and chose to put his fate in the hands of a jury, convinced that he would be exonerated. This decision was consistent with Jeff's steadfast claims that he did not do it and wanted to clear his name. It was a gamble, one that would have high stakes for both him and the family. The trial kicked off in mid-November 2020 in Columbiana, Alabama. News cameras were banned from the courtroom by the judge, but reporters were present taking copious notes. The jury, composed of local citizens, heard opening statements that previewed two starkly different narratives. The prosecution's story that Kath's death was no accident, but a result of a drunken domestic argument gone fatally wrong. Prosecutors contended that Jeff West, frustrated by his wife's heavy drinking and her fixation on social media to promote her nude photos, snapped in anger and struck her with the absinthe bottle. They portrayed the West marriage as far from harmonious, highlighting those volatile text arguments as evidence of a relationship on the brink. McBrayer argued to the jury that the night of January 12, 2018, after returning from their date, Jeff and Kat got into an alcohol-fueled argument and things escalated when Kat wouldn't stop messing with her phone. And McBrayer emphasized that their theory that after Jeff threw the phone out, Kat ran out to retrieve it, and he was so enraged that he followed her and smacked her in the head with that absinthe bottle. That theory was consistent with all the evidence, the door logs, the phone data, and especially the physical evidence at the scene. John Robbins, who was defending Jeff, stuck to a simple counter-narrative. Kat's death was a tragic accident, not a homicide. In his telling, the evidence against Jeff was being misinterpreted, and there were plenty of reasonable doubts. Robbins floated the theory that Kat, extremely drunk, likely stumbled or fell on her own outside, perhaps from climbing on something or slipping in the cold weather. He pointed out that no one actually witnessed any altercation or saw Jeff strike Kat. All of the evidence was circumstantial. He aimed to dismantle the prosecution's timeline by suggesting very innocent explanations. Maybe Jeff didn't recall waking up and pacing if he did. Maybe he simply forgot whether he closed the door or not. Okay. And crucially, Robbins attacked the forensic evidence as inconclusive. He argued that the absinthe bottle might not even be the true murder weapon, pointing out that no traces of hair or skin from Kat were found on it, and no blood spatter was found on Jeff's clothing or person. If Jeff had bludgeoned his wife at close range, wouldn't some blood be found on him? But there was none. The prosecution would counter that Jeff could have wiped that evidence away, or simply that the nature of the injury didn't produce any cast-off spatter on the assailant in this case. After closing arguments, the jurors had a lot to ponder. They deliberated for nearly 5 hours on November 17th, 2020, which often signals careful consideration. In the end, they returned a verdict that split the difference. Guilty of manslaughter, not murder. Manslaughter under Alabama law, a Class B felony, implies the jury found that Jeff caused Kat's death recklessly, but without the intent to kill her. It carries a lighter potential sentence than murder. This outcome suggested that the jury was convinced Jeff was responsible for Kat's death, but perhaps had lingering doubt about whether he meant to do it or whether it was an intentional act versus a heat-of-the-moment tragedy. And indeed, one juror would later tell reporters that the evidence supported that Jeff's actions resulted in Kat's death, but did not prove he intentionally murdered her. Now, in February 2021, Jeff West appeared before Judge Bill Bostic for sentencing. The courtroom scene was poignant and highly emotional. By law, manslaughter in Alabama carries up to 20 years. Prosecutors asked the judge to impose a near maximum term, arguing that Jeff still took no responsibility. The defense urged leniency, citing Jeff's clean record and background. Jeff himself did not testify at sentencing, but he did make a short statement, notably not apologizing nor admitting guilt, but rather asking for mercy so he could be with his family. He still maintained his innocence implicitly by not addressing Kat or expressing any remorse for a crime that he says he didn't commit. Perhaps the most powerful moment was when Lola West, the couple's daughter, now 15, spoke publicly for the first time about her parents. She took the stand and tearfully begged the judge for leniency for her father. Judge Bostic listened, but he made it clear that while he respected the family's loyalty, their belief in Jeff's innocence did not override the jury's verdict or the evidence. In fact, he remarked somewhat pointedly that Kat's mother, Nancy, appeared to be ignoring the evidence in her unwavering defense of Jeff. The judge noted that he had to sentence based on the facts established, not on the family's forgiveness or wishes. And ultimately, Judge Bostic sentenced Jeff West to 16 years in state prison. Since this case ended up becoming a national sensation, of course, as I'm sure you can guess, people started to blame Kat, the victim in the situation, for what allegedly happened to her, especially considering there was still speculation that it was done by a third party, despite her husband actually being convicted and sent to prison regarding her death. Anytime there's any type of sex work involved in a case, people immediately want to blame the sex worker for what happened to them. And I'd just like to take a moment to make something very, very clear. Whether you are a sex worker out of means, out of desperation, out of low self esteem, if someone wants to post sexy photos of themselves on the internet to either celebrate and empower themselves, or if they are seeking outside validation and attention, none of those things warrant anybody being murdered. So we have to stop deciding that because someone wants to post sexy photos of themselves or be a sex worker or anything in between, that does not warrant somebody else murdering them. And it is truly, truly disgusting that people can look at a case like this and look at this beautiful woman, the modern day Marilyn Monroe, and assume that she was asking for what happened to her. I find it vile and revolting that because, just like probably everybody else, when Kate got a little intoxicated, she became uninhibited. She danced and sang and was silly and maybe fell and tripped, but who hasn't? None of that means that she should not be honored, that she should not be missed, that she does not deserve justice. And I really, really hope that her memory is not in vain, especially by her own family members who want to exonerate her murderer. You know what's worse than getting drunk and tripping and dancing on a table is murdering somebody. And no amount of intoxication justifies one human killing another human being. This case really, really broke my heart because there has been so much speculation around her having a stalker, and putting yourself online in any way is inherently dangerous. You do need to be very careful, especially if you are in a space where people feel like they have some kind of bond with you, some kind of claim to you because they've seen more intimate areas of your body or even your life. Just because you don't want to believe someone you love is capable of doing something really, really terrible to another person doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I really hope that this is a wake up call for Kat's family who supported her murderer. It's truly disgusting to me. It's horrific to me. But I'm really curious what you guys think. What do you think about this case? What do you think of Kat's parents? And what do you think about Jeff and how he handled the whole situation? I feel like he was obviously suspicious from the start. Anyways, I need to stop myself before I go on another rant because I will rant about this for a very long time. So, everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's coverage. I hope you're enjoying the extra uploads. And remember, if you're a single parent, please send your Amazon wish list to me. I would love to feature your list and your story on my channel. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in today. Stay safe out there, ask questions, and always stay skeptical. I'll see you in my next video soon.